Yeah, the title of today's keynote is pretty blunt. It's pretty blasé, and it really is intended to be a thought-provoking discussion with you, and really involves a little thing called common sense. So I guess to start off the discussion, I really wanted to share with you my personal journey over the last week or so that's arrived with me being here today on stage. It's nothing out of the ordinary, but I think when we sort of move the unconscious behaviour into conscious behaviour and stand back and reflect on some of our own processes, that things start to become apparent, which are quite interesting. And it all really comes down to, if I can get out of my pocket, one little thing called a smartphone, which I'm sure 99% of you out in the audience also have one of these on you. And a week ago, I said to Anka, who's our marketing director, that I was well aware of today's, or yesterday and today's conference, and I initially had to move some things around, but I was definitely keen to come. So things fortunately did fall into place a week ago, and I emailed Anka and said, hey, I'm keen to be there, can we make it happen? And Anka emailed me back and said, absolutely, here are the details again. And with that bit of information, I then forwarded on that bit of information and the dates and the venue to our lovely travel agent in Singapore, Yvonne, and she obviously quickly came back with some ticketing information for my book flights, all via the smartphone. From there, I decided to book my own accommodation, loaded up booking.com, credit card details already stored in that. Within 5-10 seconds, I'm booked into this lovely hotel for yesterday and today. I then took the receipt that those guys sent me from the hotel and forwarded it to the hotel and said, hey guys, can you help me out here and organise some transport from the airport to this venue. Yesterday morning, when I got up nice and early and left Singapore to venture here, got the smartphone out and went straight onto Uber, and lo and behold, within 5 minutes, within 5 minutes, I've got a car picking me up, and shortly thereafter, I'm at Changi Airport, about to depart to come here. So, yeah, nothing out of the ordinary. I'm sure that that experience for me over the last week is quite similar to how everyone in the audience behaves and engages from a consumer perspective, and really highlights, I guess, our reliance on mobility in today's day and age. And it hasn't been for long that we've been so reliant on mobility. So what I'd like to do is actually get a bit of a poll going right now, and the folk here have organised a voting poll, which will hopefully come up on the screen fairly shortly. Just bear with us for a second. Oh, we've already done that, have we? Sorry, I got a bit ahead of myself there. So yeah, we asked the question earlier on, do you consider your mobile phone to be the single most important element of your individual productivity? And it's no surprise that 100% of the people here have voted yes to that. And to my earlier point, you know, I think it was 2007 that smartphones became mainstream, and so we're not even looking at 10 years that things have changed drastically for us, and that these tools of the trade, as we call them, have now become a pivotal part of the way that we go about our daily lives. Interesting on that point, I think no one would dispute the fact that from an individual, personalised consumer perspective, that mobility is absolutely critical. But we then raised the question regarding your HR systems and your HR software, and asked the same question as to how many of you, I think it was in the last 30 days, have utilised a mobile device to actually participate and undertake such HR activities. And our lovely people over here will put the next slide up. 14.3% said yes, and the remainder said no. That's really an interesting thing. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. How can it be that in an organisation, all of your employees, or the far majority of them, are coming into work and they've got expectations from a consumer's perspective as to how they go about their daily lives, or even in a hybrid individual and work environment, like I shared with you my journey over the last week. Of course, I was booking and undertaking these activities, but it was work-related. So it's just amazing. How can that possibly be that in today's age, when we've already identified that 100% of people say that the mobile phone is the most productive tool in the kit bag for their daily lives, that only 14% of people have actually actively used a mobile device in the day-to-day activities with respect to HR processes. Thanks for that, guys. So with that, we'll go through a couple of more discussion points. So why is it that we've got this massive mismatch in the marketplace where the market's saying, hey, we all use mobile devices, we demand mobile devices, we demand mobility. Why is it that organisations simply aren't matching that demand in the marketplace with the right processes and technology to be able to provide the outcome that employers are demanding? And as we know, ultimately those organisations in the marketplace that are successful, that have biggest market share and that drive continual competitive advantages, ultimately always have the stronger alignment to the market demands than what their competitors who aren't as successful do. So it's really interesting. And some of the feedback that SumTotal got from going and interviewing a lot of our customers and advisory firms and some of our partners as to why this is the case is shown on that slide there. And it really centred around two reasons: implementation challenges and usage challenges. And on the implementation side, we've got rationale there that it's pretty much too difficult, that the organisations can't get the right buy-in from a funding perspective. They can't get the right technical ability and resourcing to be able to deploy such capability. And also there's just generally, in relation to learning as a major part of HR, there's a mismatch between, okay, how do we actually do this? How do we then change learning and related HR processes from being structured, time-allocated processes to having employees ultimately doing things at their own time. From the usage challenges, similar things there, mobility and connectivity issues. It doesn't work fast enough. It's just not a viable option there. And lack of personal time as well to be able to undertake such training. And finally, a perceived disparity between what's available using traditional primary interfaces, as we'd call them, so your desktop, your laptop interfaces compared to what's available on a mobile device. But that point's really interesting because we've all just established that our mobile phones are our most important tool of the trade. And I think I've been using personally my banking on an app for, must be nearly 10 years now, or close to it, 8 years or so. Sure, you can't actually undertake everything that you could do logging into your internet banking on a primary interface, but I would say that 95% of the time, using that as an example, I can, using a mobile app is more than suffice. So that in itself is quite interesting. Sure, Facebook and other social media, when it first came to market, was the primary interface was desktop, notebook, but sure, as we've already established, that most of us now have probably logged into Facebook or LinkedIn or you name it multiple times today, and frankly, you're getting pretty much everything you want from a mobile device. So yeah, very, very interesting. And once again, just as Bill experienced his mismatch between what he'd like on a mobile device and unfortunately the state of passports and visas still being very traditional in the way that they're presented to us. This slide here actually represents a complete mismatch between what the market is telling us. So if we go to the next slide, which I've got there. So we already know that these aspects at the moment of talent mobility, so top organisations are now understanding that they have to be able to adapt and change and really utilise a mobile workforce. That's not a new notion. I'm sure people have been getting on stages like this for 10, 15 years and talking about the same thing. So that's already in a mature stage. Compliance, from a learning perspective, compliance is never going to go away. and it really is one of the drivers behind ultimately why people make decisions and why businesses act, and the risks of not matching and adhering to what compliance requirements are out there can be quite catastrophic for an organisation. And engagement and retention. So we know that in this day and age, that employees are looking to be more engaged. The days have gone where perhaps more so the baby boomer generation and those before the baby boomer generation were driven from a career perspective, from stability. You know, they wanted to have one, maybe two jobs in their career. They were looking for, you know, constant pay increases, and as long as they were getting paid properly, they were pretty content with their day-to-day career and their day-to-day working lives. And retention as well. So we know in the marketplace now, and I'm sure there's plenty of people with us at this conference who can get up and tell you the cost, the tangible evidence-based costs of people leaving the organisation. Not only are there these costs of that happening, but we're well aware from all of the advisory firms and the market analysts that there's a massive skill shortage coming up in the marketplace. Well, there already is a significant skill shortage, and you can't afford to be losing people more so now than ever before. That moves us to this notion of a self-developing organisation. And it's something that SumTotal has worked very closely with the likes of Deloitte and Josh Burson, who some of you may have heard speak yesterday. It's this concept, just like my personal consumer experience of getting to this venue today, that individuals in an organisation now, more so than ever, are absolutely driven by what's in it for them in terms of their career development, their ability to continually learn, and the ability to have transparency as to how they can move within an organisation and advance their career. And as we've said earlier on, organisations who ultimately get this concept are able to drive a significant competitive advantage in the marketplace. It's the real difference between, as I said, those who are successful and those who aren't. And there are a number of elements to this. I'm sure when we talk to our clients out in the Asian marketplace, we're well aware that millennials now, I know it's even more of a case in India, but generally across the geographies, millennials are now about 50% of a workforce. And in India, we've got some clients who are 70 to 80% of a workforce. Now, once again, how do you adapt to that? And it's one of the major struggles that organisations are facing. How do we adapt to this new generation coming up the ranks who ultimately have completely different viewpoints on how they see their career and how they see their advancement and what a job means to them? And once again, mobility. Well, we know that millennials are the biggest adapters and utilisers of mobility. So once again, what's happening out there, and why is it the case once again that organisations simply are not either through competency or just an unwillingness to listen to the facts and not providing their HR services via mobility devices? This concept of the self-developing organisation, so we've found with these organisations that we deal with that it's really the culmination of career mobility, continuous learning, and knowledge acceleration and knowledge sharing that are the key drivers behind getting people to stay in your organisation, getting them to stay longer, and that are always looking for opportunities to develop themselves. So this interwoven componentry where mobility is absolutely key and at the centre is one of these drivers behind successful organisations today. And as the nice quote there from Thomas Edison says, that vision without an execution is just hallucination. So it's one thing, I guess, for organisations to say, hey, we understand what you're saying, and we realise that this is crazy, that our mobility strategy really isn't adhering to what the market's demanding. But I guess it's another part to actually execute on that. And I think that's where a lot of organisations are currently struggling. How does SumTotal do this? Well, that's one thing for me to get up on stage and identify these issues. But we want to share with you today at a very high level how we ultimately are going about doing this. And it ties into this whole consumerism and consumer trend around mobility. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We realise, well, there's already numerous technology vendors out there who simply get it, and they've been able to continually provide that value to their consumers and their customers via their mobile strategy. We realised that, yeah, you can't have everything on a mobile app that perhaps you could on a desktop or notebook interface. But what we've been able to do is take a combination of those critical elements, which are shown up there from an HR perspective. So, the compensation details, some payroll, critical information, ongoing learning and development, and approval workflows, and be able to position that and successfully push that out to our customer market base. And really, the feedback that we've had so far, in all modesty, is exceptional on that. And we feel that, without this meaning to be overtly a sales pitch, but we feel that that is really starting to hit the spot, and that capability and that ability to really understand, well, what can we do, what can't we do, and then position that appropriately through the mobile device as being very well received. As the stats show there, that mobile learning continually increases employee engagement. Those who have done this successfully already have been quite forthcoming in their information and their return on investment that they've had. We can see that the decision makers and employees themselves provide rapid return on investment for their organisations with the improvements that they can receive through mobility. And we've seen this across many of the marketing leading organisations out there who have been on the forefront of really adapting and changing. At a C level within organisations, culture and engagement is a critical issue, and mobility that we've found through mobile and through mobility, that ability to be able to collaborate amongst employees, that ability to have that personalised, individualised approach to their career and their development has really helped fill that gap between some of the issues in the marketplace. So onto a case study of ours, and the guys are here for the conference and they can happily talk you through any others. But we've all heard of Pfizer, a massive global pharmaceutical company, the third largest in the world. They had these challenges themselves across their 175,000 employees, that they needed to be able to really adapt to their mobile workforce. They'd had that for quite a while. They needed to be able to reduce costs of traditional training and compliance prompted training sessions, and really they needed to be able to manoeuvre that into increasing the profitability of a number of their product lines, which they were able to do. And that's really in itself quite typical of the organisations we deal with in Asia. We've got a number of organisations in the oil and gas industry in Asia, and as a lot of us know, oil and gas prices have gone down considerably over the last couple of years. So these organisations, understanding that their profitability has gone down considerably, have looked at ways to drive operational efficiencies, reduce costs, but coupled with that, roll out a market-leading employee mobility engagement process. So many of these organisations have turned around some traditional HR processes to be fronted by mobility. And I'll leave you there with a couple of analyst thought processes there, or from Gartner, on how mobility is really changing, and how organisations who do take on board and understand and execute on appropriate HR mobility strategy are definitely driving competitive advantage for themselves.